Our guest today has an impressive track record of driving measurable improvements in product design and user experience through their expertise in human factors, applied cognition, and UX research. They've led UX research efforts at organizations ranging from Fortune 500 companies to startups, tackling challenges across industries such as e-learning, medical devices, and enterprise software. Their work has been instrumental in shaping product development, influencing design decisions, and ensuring that the user's voice is heard throughout the entire process. And as a consultant, they have helped their clients improve UX research practices, develop in-house research skills, and translate research findings into practical strategies for business success. So with that said, I'm thrilled to welcome Thomas Stokes, co-founder and principal at Drillbit Labs, a UX research consulting firm, to the Samelogic podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Samelogic, smart intercept surveys that product teams love. Thomas, welcome to the show. First off, congratulations on the launch of Drillbit Labs. How's it been?
Thanks, Dwayne. It's good chatting to you. I'm happy to be here. It's been a fantastic response to the launch. I appreciate your shout out as well. And I just have to say I'm really encouraged by the outpouring of support from the community this week. It's been best week I've had in years.
Lovely. I love that. So, like, pretty much speaking about your background and your career and everything like that in UX, we'll go all the way back to, when you started as a UX researcher, and even before that as well. What inspired you to pursue a career in UX research, and how did your background in psychology and human factors influence that decision?
Yeah, I had a moment where I kind of realized that this was the path I wanted to go down my first semester of college. So pretty early, I'd say, I realized that this was really interesting to me. Going into college, I was a psych major. I really liked psychology in high school. I got to take a few courses in it, and I thought it was fantastic. And I particularly liked the elements of like cognitive psych, perception, memory, learning, studying like how people think. So I knew I liked that. I also really appreciated any course in high school that had like lab components. And then I also loved statistics. So I go into undergrad, right? I kind of have this idea like I like psych, I like kind of applied science, and I really like statistics. What can I do with that? And I took a course my first semester. It was kind of like one of those survey seminar courses. The gist, it wasn't the title of the course, but basically what it was pick your career psych major. The one project you had to do for this course in the semester was write a paper about what you would do with your psych major once you graduated. And I read the course textbook was just about different careers people take on in psychology. And I got to this section that was about human factors, human computer interaction, and user experience. And I just read that and it clicked. I thought that's perfect. I think that's inherently interesting. So I wrote my paper that semester. My final project, so to speak, was why I thought that was an interesting field of study, how I would go about starting my career from that point where I was a freshman to taking courses on human factors and user experience, joining a research lab. I even like wrote out these are the grad schools in the area for a PhD or a master's in these fields. These are the GPAs you need. These are the requirements for entry. This is how I will do that. So I was pretty linear and explicit at about 18 years old that like this was the thing that I wanted to do.
Oh wow, that's pretty early on. A lot of people don't know until like further in their career, but that's really amazing. You've also like conducted research in various industries, from medical devices to online education. How do you adapt your research methods and approaches to fit the unique needs and constraints of each industry? And like, what have you learned about the common threads that unite UX research across different sectors?
Yeah, this is a question that I wish I could like hear my answer to 10 years ago because I think my answer has shifted a lot. If you asked me back then, I think what I would tell you is that, oh yeah, like there's these back like super differences from medical devices to online education to open source software. But now I think my answer is a bit more simple. It's that if you kind of just squint your eyes and look, they all have the same shape. Every industry applying research in that industry has a lot of the same ideas behind it. A lot of your research principles, a lot of UX principles hold true. It's just a specific combination of logistics and kind of pain points. Every industry, every situation has its unique combination of the same features, if that makes sense. It's basically slight variations on that same theme. So just for sake of example, like we like to document what we do in our processes, right? I think we can all agree. Documenting how we do something is really important in any industry. However, in my time in medical devices, that was placed much more emphasis on proper documentation, right? So that gets a bit more focus in medical than, say, open source software. But again, it's the same idea. It's just what we focus on and maybe the issues we encounter tend to be a little bit different.
And also like like as a UX consultant before, like you've likely worked with like clients who have like varying needs of or varying levels of UX maturity. How do you assess a client's UX maturity level, and how do you tailor your approach to meet them where they are and help them advance their UX practice?
Yeah, assessing maturity level is it's almost a thorny subject with me. I think right now, just to kind of let you in on stuff I've been thinking about lately. I've been surveying the different ways that folks actually assess maturity, and there's some commonalities, right? There's certain things around people, process, and technology. That's kind of a common trio of things that we look at. And that's an easy way to get started, right? If I just do an assessment of people, what is your current staffing? How do you organize your team? Um, what are their skill sets vis-a-vis what ideally their skill set might look like? Plus process, how do you actually go about doing this? How consistent are you with that process? How efficient and effective is it? And then, you know, technology platforms. Do you have the budget for research software? Do people have the tools they need to be effective? Those three things, in some can tell you a lot about where a team's at, but I think there are varying themes or different, I guess, scoring categories that different groups will use that might or might not be the most indicative of actual maturity. I think there's a lot of vanity metrics in UX maturity models right now, and I try to avoid those. Really, what I'm most focused on, and hopefully this comes across in my discussion of people, process, technology, is how how effective are you at utilizing the resources you have currently, and then what is the gap between where you could be and where you are now, and how do we close in on that? So I'm not necessarily always trying to think about like, okay, level 4 maturity looks like X, Y, and Z, these exact bullet points. Let's start doing those. I'm more so thinking you, your team, where it is right now, where your team could be 6 months, a year, 2, 4 years from now. What does that look like? And specifically, how do we tailor an approach for you that'll get you there? Um, Hopefully that'll make sense. Does that kind of resonate with you?
It does, it does. One of the things that I'm that's on my mind as well is pretty much the way how organizations struggle with integrating like proper UX research practices into their development processes. Um, what advice would you have, or what advice would you give to UX researchers working in like these like fast-paced environments, uh, s- so that they can like ensure that research keeps a pace with the rapid iteration and like very constant delivery cycles.
Yeah, there's there's 2 points that I want to make there. One is just a general principle first is our greatest competitor as researchers is doing nothing, right? So as researchers, the number one thing that we are working against is not doing research at all, right? So having that on the mind is, I think, relevant. It should help orient people to like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm kind of making sure that not doing anything doesn't win out over me. So how do I do that? Which moves on to the second point. How does the actual rubber meet the road in terms of making sure that we do research, we do it consistently? And I think there are groups doing this now pretty successfully. I'd like to see it maybe more widespread. I think maybe there is a little bit of a knowledge or a just implementation gap around doing this, but a more programmatic approach to user research can be remarkably effective at keeping up with these fast-paced delivery cycles. For example, I've set up rapid research programs, is what we'll call them, for a number of different groups. And what it does is essentially set the infrastructure for doing rapid iterative testing. And so you set up guardrails, you set up process, you set up documentation templates. And the important part is you make this infrastructure known to all your stakeholders. And you can give them a really quick checklist like, okay, for these rapid research projects where we're giving you feedback on your designs, here's the inputs we need. You give us A, B, C, and D, and we'll get you a project back in 4 days. So you give this to us Monday, we can get you back Friday with that information. All we need is you just adhere to this stuff here. And so kind of having those, they're almost like SLAs with your stakeholders, right? Having that and having a infrastructure, again, I keep on saying that, to afford a research program, a programmatic approach helps you match up with their programmatic approach to product development. So I think that's the mindset there. It's okay, how do I make sure that research happens? Oh, let me be programmatic. Let me establish something that is repeatable and effective. That way we're not turning the wheel every single time. It's a flywheel that keeps up its momentum.
I love that. Um, as a leader in the UX research community, what do you see as the most pressing challenges and opportunities pretty much facing the field today? And like how is Drillbit Labs positioned to address those issues and shape the future of UX research?
Yeah, so I'll start out there by just saying Lawton Pybus, my co-founder, and I started Drillbit Labs with essentially a singular vision and mission, and it's advancing the practice of user research in the industry. So to that end, we thought, you know, essentially if by the end of this, whenever it ends, if we can say, yeah, we meaningfully took where UX research was as an industry and brought it to a better state by the end, we'd be very happy with that. So if you look at what we do as a business, there's really three things that we do. One would kind of categorize as consulting and advising, but generally there, what we're doing is working with digital leaders, whether that be a UX manager, or maybe a design leader, whatever title makes sense there, depending on the team. We're looking at their process and strategy and trying to optimize it, bring it, make it better in some way. So it can look like a lot of different things. And it's typically in those three categories that I talked about before with people, process, and technology. It could be that their hiring processes actually aren't optimized. So they're not getting the talent on their team that they need. We could consult on that. It could be that their process is off. There's something inefficient or ineffective about the way they do their work that we can come in with. It could even be that they might not know how to show the value and then get the resources that they need. So sometimes we'll come in and consult on things like ROI calculations and how to do budget proposals. So we've got that consulting arm that helps teams operate at a better level. We also have a education. We run workshops. We're also developing courses right now for individuals. But the idea there is, let's upskill individual research skills. So we work at the team level with consulting. We look at the more individual level with training. And then, of course, also we offer research services. And those three things allow us to kind of combine, depending on a particular person or particular team's needs, we can combine those services to bridge the gap from where they are now to a better practice. But some of the things that we're seeing most frequently right now, I alluded to two kind of in my like consulting summary. One is around, I guess I'll say business savvy, proving out the value of the team. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest competitors to doing research is not doing any research. So, how do we make sure that we position ourselves as a mission critical function and prove that to the business so that we get the resources we need so we can do the work? That is something we're noticing, especially that could be partially seasonal. We are in a downturn. A lot of people are getting their budgets cut. So helping folks, work against that trend is something that we're seeing right now. And the other, I don't hear much about this. A lot of people don't really talk about it, but I mentioned it with the people issue of like recruiting's hard, hiring is hard. There's a lot of things that like, I don't know about you, but no one ever taught me how to do an interview effectively or how to assess candidates. And it turns out a lot of the folk knowledge we have around it is actually counterproductive and inefficient. So there's a lot of little things that like we don't get training for until we hit leadership positions that if we got a little bit better, we optimized a little bit, we'd be so much better off. But the question becomes, okay, then how do we get those principles that managers need to be effective instilled in them? And so those are the two things I'll say. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but two issues. One, proving the value, and two, these skill gaps that we don't really realize that are skill gaps until we're put in the position that we have to do them, things that are outside of our main expertise.
For sure,
Does
for
that make
sure. And
sense? Yeah.
yeah, it does, it does. Also like when it comes on to the name as well, I'm really fascinated
Mm.
with like, the name Drillbit Labs. You mentioned that it has some it has multi-layered references and some history. So like let's dig into that.
Yeah. So Lawton and I, we've both been writing for a little while. Dwayne, I think you've read both of our newsletters for a bit, but his is called The Quarter Inch Hole. Mine is called Annotations, which has to do with just like my habit of reading things and writing on them. And like I would literally sit down with like academic articles and just jot all over them. So we've got these existing newsletters and we wanted to come up with a name that, you know, kind of referred to both of them. Annotations, we couldn't come up with one that worked for it. So instead we said, okay, Quarter Inch Hole, what could the consulting company's name be that's referential to that? And we chose Drillbit Labs. And it's a reference to the Theodore Levitt quote that says, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't remember it exactly, but essentially it says that, people don't want a quarter inch drill bit, they want a quarter inch hole, right? And it's kind of a way to summarize the jobs be done framework almost. It's people want the end effect, not the particular exact way of going about getting the end effect. And so to us, in addition to just being a reference that some people catch with drill bit, it's got a deeper meaning in that on a principled level, Lawton and and I guess Drillbit Labs, we believe that it's really important to remember the reason why we do our work isn't to come up with really fancy methods that we just plot out like, hey, everybody, look at this particular technique we came up with. The reason why we do our work is the end goal, to help teams get better at user research. So it's a reminder to ourselves that like, just like people don't want quarter inch drill bit, they want a quarter inch hole. People don't necessarily want us to just come in and be like, oh, look how smart we are. Look at this thing that we came up with that can help you. They want
Mm.
us to help them. So it's just always a good reminder to stay focused on the teams that we serve.
Got it. Got it. I love that. Let's stay here for a bit. When it
Yeah.
comes on to like common mistakes as well, like a lot of times, we see like these fancy like frameworks and terminologies and everything. That's one thing I do see like happening in the industry where people kind of like prefer like the process more than the outcome. Um, but or prefer the outcome more than the process, or vice versa. But like, what are some common mistakes that you see companies making when it comes on to, conducting proper research, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, this is another one that I'd really be curious what my answer would have been years and years ago, because I think it's another one where my thinking has evolved. So aside from not doing research, right, like we talked about earlier, that'd be the number one. Um, Kind of the B level mistakes people make. They fall into different categories, I think. So there's some that are just about like flawed study design. So setting something up that really wasn't going to get them what they needed from the start, whether that be they are trying to find a particular result, not necessarily open to what the data say to them, but they're going out hunting for something in particular. That I think tends to be more common than other categories like uh, just silly mistakes made during the research process, whether that be, some analytical mistake where like we slipped and we entered a different number into our formula that made our results not turn out actually accurate, or trying to apply one research finding to a new context, and the new context is actually not a one-to-one comparison, so their findings don't apply. Those categories happen and they exist, but I think probably the most common set of issues is around that study at the beginning that might not have been fully well considered and developed from a like unbiased standpoint. Going out, setting off to do research to find something in particular is an issue I see kind of commonly these days.
And how do you convince stakeholders who may be skeptical about the value of UX research to invest in it, especially seeing like the state of the industry now? So it's greatly like the thing I'm happy about, like the state of the industry is improving, but it still seems like an uphill battle for a lot of people who are, want like more budget and more things to do, more agency. How do you convince stakeholders to invest in UX research?
I'd say three-prong approach here. There's three things you can do, and I think you should do all of them. They're best in combination. It's kind of like classic logos, pathos, ethos. Your speech needs all three, right? So one, they might not be that cool sounding, but ROI calculations, get good at doing them. You can prove out the value of research very plainly and in a way that people understand using ROI calculations. I think a lot of people might be intimidated by them, might be maybe turned off by them, but trust me when I say you can do them. Like you, the listener right now, you can do ROI calculations. I guarantee it. Maybe you need a helping hand to get going, but you can show. For example, I remember doing a project where we edited the site structure, like the main level navigation. Um, there was a few issues that we're noticing. Call center, we're getting a lot of calls about things that people should be able to kind of find and do online. So we revised the design, we tested it, and we showed, okay, if you'd made these changes, you'll have about a drop in call volume based off some numbers that we're seeing, and the average rate of these errors versus the reduced rate and the cost associated with a call representative, it'll be about this much a month. And so this actually pays for itself in about a couple of weeks. And then we've generated cost savings on the order of blank over the course of the year. You can do that really easily. So that's prong number one. Let's get better as an industry at ROI calculations. Two, people love a good story, Dwayne, right? Like ROI calculations, it kind of gives you that firm, fantastic, like, oh yes, undisputable numbers. But people also love a journey, right? And so if we can highlight, think about this, think about projects you've done where it's almost like the hero's journey. You've started in a particular place. There's like the set of problems. There's this issue that the company is facing, the issue the design is facing. And through your process, um, there's these gradual learnings that take place or these revelations. And by doing that and implementing the design, you've ended up in this new place, right? So it could even be the same thing that you do the ROI calculation on. It could be a different story, but develop your success stories that are actual, almost narratives, because that'll convince people too. And then third, selectively invite folks to sessions that show them the truth, the reality of where your experiences are right now. So them seeing it for themselves. I remember once, this was, I won't say where, because the client kind of has like a monopoly on this particular industry. So even just saying industry hints at who it was, but had a group I was working for, and they were not necessarily convinced that they had any issues with um, usability. Like they kind of felt like they needed a design refresh, but more just like putting makeup on it and calling it good. We felt differently. And so I invited several of their leaders to these live streamed sessions. I just really quickly invited like 8 people in their target market into had a usability lab, invited them, live streamed the sessions, said, "Hey, I just want you guys to see people interact. Have you seen someone use the app? Okay, let's just watch, see what happens." A lot of folks haven't actually seen real users use their designs, and often just presenting that in front of them will make them convert to your way of thinking. So those are the 3 prongs: ROI, stories, and then literally sit them down and show them what's happening. I find that to be particularly effective when you can get all 3 going. The better case you can develop, the better, I say.
I love that. I love that. What advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career in UX research today?
I'm curious what you say on that one too, but there are a couple of things there. And actually, I get that question pretty often. So depending on the person, I'll focus on different things. For example, you've got a lot of folks right now who are transitioning from whatever into UX research. Maybe they were doing some form of research before. In that case, I say, hey, yeah, the main thing for you is going to be studying UX fundamentals and principles, really just the kind of science of what user experience is. Study what makes up usability. What are the component parts of that? What are the heuristics and best practices when it comes to um, usability? And then start to study how the research methods you already know get recontextualized to study how people use technology. So that's the easy answer there. Let's imagine instead it was like a high school student just like, I'm going in and going to college. I want to study UX. What do I do? Um, for them, it is, again, a similar answer, but particularly if they want to go into UX research, I also advise them to study up on their research methods a lot. Also, practice them. That's a big thing that I think a lot of folks could benefit from is, let's say you're listening to this right now. Let's say you're in a UX research course, and this week you learned what a heuristic evaluation is. Time box, amount of time that you can commit to practicing the methods that you learn as you learn them. So if you just learned heuristic evaluations, let's say you've committed 2 hours a week to practicing your methods. Choose an experience, go in, conduct that heuristic evaluation, and take notes on, okay, once I start to apply these things that I'm learning, I notice whatever your observations are. Like, so in the future, I'm going to focus on X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, whatever implications those observations have for you individually in your practice. So I think it's that combination. It's UX fundamentals and principles, research methods, and practice. Again, kind of a three-pronged approach.
All right, I love that. I love that. We're wrapping up here. I ask this question to everyone who comes on the show, Thomas, and this is my question to you. What's one weakness that you've turned into your strength?
Oh boy. One that I'm cautious to respond on this. Well, I'll let other people determine if this is accurate or not. But um, one thing I know to be true about myself is that I'm not a natural writer. I struggled with writing a lot growing up. I would not say I've ever been particularly good at writing. It was a weakness. I'm not sure if it's a strength yet, though. I've been writing for a few years. It might just be that like I've got a lot to say and I'm well read when it comes to UX. Or it might be that the articles are good. Who knows? At least people don't tell me to my face that they're not good. Everyone says very complimentary things, but I'd like to think that writing would be one thing I've at least started the journey to turning into a strength. Um, but that is just through very deliberate practice that happened. And I'm not sure I'm completely there yet.
Ongoing. I love that still, because like when you know it's your weakness, pretty much you can like make it stronger, and like pretty much you like your writing is pretty good. So,
Well,
so I
thank you.
think it's your strength. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. I love your background, I love your story, and I'm wishing you the best of luck with everything at Drillbit Labs.
Thanks, Dwayne. Obviously, always love chatting with you and keen to keep up with how things go with Samelogic. I know you don't plug it on the podcast often, but if I'm allowed to, I really like the work you guys are doing. I think you've got a very interesting product that does a lot really well for contextual surveys. So just want to say mutual admiration.
Love that. Thank you so much.